My life's work is deception, a craft I've honed to perfection. My greatest performance was playing the part of the long-lost love for a wealthy man who had lost his sight. I maintained the illusion for 3 full years, a period during which I gave him a child, and then just as seamlessly as I had entered his life, I vanished. 5 years passed. I found myself operating a modest fortune-telling business on a busy sidewalk, reading palms and peering into crystal balls for spare change. One afternoon, a small boy approached my foldable table and presented me with a crisp $100 bill. His request was simple. "I want you to find my mom." I had just managed to secure the bill in my pocket when a woman hurried toward us, her voice laced with frantic relief. "There you are. I've been searching everywhere for you." There was something unsettlingly familiar about her face. As I studied her features, a jolt of recognition ran through me. She was Isabella, the genuine article, the woman the blind man, Julian, had truly been in love with all those years ago. A heavy silence hung between us for a few seconds before I retrieved the money and extended it back toward the child. "It looks like your search is over," I said, my voice carefully neutral. "Here's your money back." He made no move to take it, his gaze fixed on me with wide, unblinking eyes. "That's not the mom I'm looking for," he stated plainly. My hand holding the banknote froze in mid-air. After a beat, I turned my attention to Isabella. "Sophia, he must be joking around, right? Here, you should probably take this." She accepted the money and took the boy's arm, attempting to lead him away. He reacted instantly, sinking his teeth into her hand and snatching the $100 back from her grasp. "This is my allowance," he declared. "You can't have it." Isabella let out a sharp hiss of pain, her expression hardening as she glared down at him. "Leo," she began. But then her posture shifted, her voice softening into a placating tone as she knelt before him. "Be a good boy and come home with Mommy. You don't want to make Daddy worry, do you?" "You two don't care about me anyway," Leo retorted, pushing her away. "Just go have another baby." He defiantly sat back down on my small stool and once again handed me the money. Isabella's patience snapped. She let out a cold, dismissive laugh, her eyes filled with a knowing sort of malice. "Fine," she said. "Do his reading. Find out if your mother even wants you back." The way she emphasized her words made it clear that Leo was aware she wasn't his biological mother. But if he knew, did that imply that Julian knew as well? When I had left, I was, for all intents and purposes, still playing the role of Isabella. My thoughts were a chaotic mess, but I kept my expression carefully blank. I accepted the money from Leo and asked, "Do you know your date of birth?" Of course, I didn't need the answer. I had carried him for nearly 10 months, and the pain of the C-section was a memory seared into my very being. I could never forget it. "January 8th, 2020, he replied with a serious look. "Dad said it was freezing that day." I remembered. It had snowed heavily, blanketing the world in a pristine, blinding white that matched the sterile interior of the hospital room. I've always been susceptible to the cold, my circulation poor even in the best of times. That winter, even with the hospital's heating system working overtime, my hands and feet were like blocks of ice. I recalled how Julian had sat at the foot of my bed that night, gently cradling my feet in his hands to warm them. He remained there for the entire night, a silent, devoted guardian. But the feet he was warming in his mind belonged to Isabella, not to me. Not to Chloe. My gaze drifted over to Isabella, who stood with her arms crossed, a picture of impatient privilege. A wave of old memories, ones I had meticulously packed away and buried in the deepest corners of my mind, threatened to surface. I forcefully shoved them back down, locking the box tight. Then, for the sake of appearances, I took out my divination sticks and began a show of making intricate calculations. After a suitable pause, I delivered my verdict. You and your mother's fates are not intertwined. You should abandon this search. Leo's lower lip began to tremble. You're lying. Daddy told me my mom would be in the place with the most liars. He wasn't wrong. I am, in fact, an exceptionally good liar. I am a professional con artist, a chameleon who has convincingly portrayed a concerned parent, a devoted girlfriend, and a secret mistress, earning rave reviews for each performance. I have catfished men online, draining a few $100s from their accounts before dumping them with a valuable lesson about gullibility. I have charmed trust fund babies in upscale bars into buying bottles of champagne that cost more than a small car. But the single greatest con of my career was pretending to be Isabella and deceiving Julian Vance for 3 years. Isabella had left the country to pursue her studies abroad. Julian, in a grand romantic gesture, went after her, but a car crash on the way left him without his sight. He fell into a profound depression, his once vibrant personality becoming dark and sullen. Unable to bear his suffering, his parents sought me out and hired me to impersonate the woman he loved. I immersed myself completely in the role. I learned to play the bass guitar, painstakingly altered my speaking voice, and practiced her unique singing style for countless hours. They were musicians, you see. Their band was just on the cusp of fame when Isabella made the decision to leave for school, and in her absence, everything had crumbled. The first time I met Julian, he was seated by a set of French doors, his unseeing eyes fixed blankly on the dancing shadows of the trees outside. I mimicked Isabella's voice perfectly, announcing my return. I never anticipated his first words to me. Why did you use a banjo for the intro on that demo? I had prepared myself for 1,000 different dramatic reunions, a tearful embrace, a volatile argument, a tender reconciliation. I had never imagined this. I fumbled for a response before managing to say, to honor our roots. The room fell silent. Julian tilted his head, a look of confusion on his face. After a long, tense pause, he said, I want to hear you sing, our first song. I breathed an internal sigh of relief. Thankfully, I had practiced their entire discography thousands of times until I knew every note and lyric by heart. Julian accompanied me on the piano. Even without his sight, his playing was exquisite, his fingers dancing across the keys with an innate grace. When the song ended, he simply said, You sang that well. Even better than before. Whether Julian was aware of the deception or not, it didn't change the fundamental truth of who I was. I was a money-grubbing fraud. I played the part of his dream girl for a paycheck. I bore his child for a handsome sum, and for an even larger sum, I walked away from it all without a backward glance. I didn't deserve him, and I certainly didn't deserve to be Leo's mother. Snapping back to the present, I told the boy flatly, Then you should try the police station. They have plenty of liars locked up in there. Leo's round, almond-shaped eyes suddenly glistened with unshed tears, and his small face crumpled with a look of utter helplessness. Isabella smirked. Can we go now? Leo reluctantly followed her, his head turned back toward me, his expression wounded. I ducked my head, quickly gathering my scattered sticks and charts. I adjusted the white wig on my head, adopted a convincing limp, and walked away without looking back. As soon as I was around the corner, I hopped on my e-scooter and sped away. They probably hadn't recognized me. I had never come face to face with the real Isabella before, and for 5 years I had suppressed every urge to catch even a glimpse of Leo. Besides, my current disguise as a stooped, elderly woman was quite effective. For a fortune-telling gig, the older and more mysterious you appear, the more clients trust you. I concluded it was merely a bizarre coincidence until the very next day. Leo reappeared at my stall, holding out another $100 bill. "Can you tell me my mom's name?" he asked. I hesitated before taking the money. "Do you just wander around by yourself like this every day? Don't your parents keep an eye on you?" He shook his head. "Dad went shopping with that woman. I snuck out." That woman? He didn't even refer to Isabella as his mother. Was it because she was unkind to him? I mulled it over for a long moment, but ultimately took the cash. Regardless of the circumstances, he was better off with them than he would ever be with me. I rattled the divination sticks for show, and then gave him an answer. "Your mom's last name is Miller, but her first name is a bit difficult to discern. However, if you purchase this special Spirit Finder charm from me for $650, I'm confident I can tell you right away." This time, Isabella had to physically drag a sobbing Leo away. I had successfully swindled him out of all his toy money, and still hadn't revealed the second half of the name. He was wailing as they left. "Wah, Mommy really is a big liar. My Transformers and my Ultraman, wah." So he truly had been looking for me on purpose. But who could have told him I was his mother? Julian? Or his parents? No matter who it was, I couldn't conceive of a single reason why they would. The boy's crying was loud and drew disapproving glares from the other street vendors. As always, I paid them no mind, hopping on my scooter and departing without a second glance. I assumed the little prince would have learned his lesson and abandoned his quest. But for the next several days, he appeared at my stall, ready to offer me more of his allowance. I tried relocating my spot, setting up on the other side of town, and even establishing myself outside a different temple. But I couldn't shake him. On the last day, he showed up wearing overalls and a small backpack, plopping himself down decisively on my stool. "Big liar," he announced. "I'm moving in with you." I immediately began to pack up my things, even yanking the stool out from under him. Leo landed on the pavement with a soft thump. He wobbled back to his feet, brushed the dust from his pants, and looked up at me with a pitiful expression that was expertly crafted to elicit sympathy. He was remarkably good at playing the victim, a trait he shared with Julian at times. I suppressed a painful pang in my chest and continued walking, ignoring him completely. There was no chance a wealthy child like him could wander off without someone following him. This had to be some sort of elaborate ploy. But after I turned the corner, I didn't get on my scooter. Instead, I took a different route and hid myself, observing Leo from a distance. He was still standing in the same spot, his hands clasped nervously, his gaze fixed intently on the direction I had gone. He looked like an exquisite, fragile doll. He had my features, but his overall aura was more reminiscent of Julian's. The moment I first laid eyes on him, my heart had been uncontrollably drawn to him, and I had to fight back a sudden urge to cry. My acting skills, however, have always been top-notch. Half an hour passed. Leo didn't move an inch, and no one from the Vance family appeared. Is this how Julian treated his own son? Was it because he knew he wasn't Isabella's child that he simply didn't care? An indescribable bitterness rose in my throat. I watched Leo for a long time before finally walking back to him. "Let's go," I said softly. "Come home with me." Leo's eyes instantly lit up, sparkling like a handful of colorful marbles. "Okay," he exclaimed, grabbing my hand, his face radiating pure, unadulterated joy. After he settled on the scooter behind me, he wrapped his small arms around my waist and asked nervously, "Big liar, are you divorced now? Do you have any other kids?" I froze for a second. For him to ask those two specific questions, someone in the Vance family must have been investigating me. I thought for a moment before answering with a question of my own. "You want to know?" You'll have to trade me an answer. Who told you to look for your mom? Leo went completely silent. He remained quiet for the entire ride home, his cheeks puffed out like an indignant little pufferfish. When we arrived at my apartment, my dog, Buddy, began circling him and sniffing curiously. Leo was startled and pressed himself against my leg. I smiled. That's Buddy. He's older than you are. He's very sweet. Don't be afraid. Buddy was a little Bichon Frise I had given to Julian as a birthday present during my first year with him. After losing his sight, he had become so withdrawn, and I felt he needed some vibrant, loving energy in his life. But on the day I left the Vances, I took the dog with me. As far as Julian knew, Buddy was probably long dead by now. But since he was my dog, he was likely as insignificant to Julian as I was. Leo crouched down and cautiously petted Buddy's head. The dog immediately flopped onto his back, exposing his fluffy belly. I had almost forgotten that Buddy had sniffed Leo right after he was born. Hey, he's licking my hand, Leo giggled. Don't touch your eyes or mouth after he licks you, and remember to wash your hands before you eat, I said as I walked inside. I changed my clothes and removed my heavy makeup. The old lady disguise was difficult to apply, but came off quickly. Leo ran over and peeked at me from the doorway, his eyes sparkling. I looked down at him, confused. He just gave me a shy smile and ran off. Are all children like this? It wasn't until I went to his room to call him for dinner that I discovered him lying in Buddy's dog bed, speaking into his watch. His tone was full of smug satisfaction. Mommy is so pretty. I saw her before you did, Dad. I didn't say a word, just stood silently in the doorway and listened. I couldn't hear what was said on the other end of the line, but Leo just snorted. So what? I get to sleep with Mommy tonight. He continued his report. Uh-huh. There's no one else here, and no big boy clothes in the closet. Mommy bought me an Ultraman, too. Then his voice turned urgent. But Mommy is so great, what if someone steals her away? I felt like I'd been completely played, tricked by this cunning father-son duo. Don't sleep in the dog bed, you'll get all dirty, I spoke up suddenly. Leo jumped, startled. He quickly ended the call and scrambled out of the dog bed, his face bright red. I found it amusing. I didn't ask who he was talking to, just took him to wash his hands for dinner. At the table, as I watched Leo devour his food, I remembered a job listing I had seen recently. They were looking for a woman around 30 and a boy around 4 to play the wife and son of a wealthy heir. The pay was $3,000 for 2 hours. It seemed almost tailor-made for me. So I said, if you want to live with me, you're coming to work with me the day after tomorrow. Leo looked up. A grain of rice stuck to the corner of his mouth. He mumbled, to trick people into buying spirit finder charms? No, I replied, to find you a rich new dad. That night, Leo slept in my bed. A while after I turned off the lights, he slowly scooted closer, his warm breath tickling my face. When I didn't react, he reached out a tiny hand and poked my cheek. It reminded me of all those nights, over 3 years, when Julian would trace the features of my face. His long, sensitive fingers would glide over my eyebrows, my eyes, my nose, and finally come to rest on my lips. I would laugh and say, "It's not like you've never seen me before. Why are you doing this?" His dark, unseeing eyes would stare straight at me, yet they still seemed to sparkle. "I want to remember you more clearly," he'd whisper. Later, on the night I told him I was pregnant, he traced my face over and over again, as if he were trying to carve its every detail into his heart. "Isabella," he had asked, "will you marry me?" Leo's little hand was soft and chubby, and it felt pleasant against my face. "Mommy, why didn't you come see me? I missed you so much, Mommy." He snuggled into my arms, a tiny, warm bundle. I couldn't hold back any longer. Tears soaked my pillow in the silent darkness. The day of the acting gig, I took Leo to the designated restaurant right on time. I had been here before with Julian. It was after he had finally worked up the courage to start writing music again for the first time since going blind. He had asked a friend to help him release a single. To help him compose, I had studied every musical instrument I could get my hands on. I had even discovered, much to my surprise, that we were incredibly compatible musically. He never again asked me a question like the one from our very first meeting. "Not bad. She's beautiful." A man's voice broke me out of my thoughts. It was the wealthy heir, Connor. He did in fact have a wife who was living abroad, but she had married him for his money, and then left. He was too embarrassed to admit the truth, so he hired actors to keep up appearances for his family and friends back home. To make his story more believable, he had even added a fictional child to the mix. He seemed very pleased with us, repeatedly praising Leo. "So cute! He actually looks a little bit like me." Leo looked up at him, then over at me, his expression clearly asking, "Do I?" One had monolids, the other had double eyelids. They looked nothing alike, but he was the client, so I smiled agreeably. "He does." "Go on, call him Daddy," I prompted. Leo looked confused for a second, but he was a quick study. "Daddy!" Connor was delighted and took his hand as they walked into the restaurant. "Now, be a sweet talker in there. Call me Daddy a few more times and I'll give you some spending money, okay?" "Okay, Daddy. Daddy!" His voice was loud and clear. Inside the private room, all eyes turned to me and Leo. Connor's friends immediately started congratulating and teasing him. I handled it all with smooth, practiced replies until my gaze fell upon a cold, familiar face in the corner of the room. With his sight restored, those sharp eyes were even more handsome than I remembered. But right now, they were narrowed in a slight, mocking smile. "Heh." When Leo saw him, he scampered over and threw himself into his arms. "Daddy!" The chatter in the room abruptly died. Our eyes met across the crowd. 5 years had passed. Julian looked more mature, his features sharper and more defined. After a tense, silent moment, I was the first one to move. I walked over to him, gently pulled Leo back, and laughed. "You can't just call any handsome uncle Daddy. If you do that, you'll have to call every uncle in this room Daddy, won't you?" The room filled with laughter again. People praised me for being quick-witted, complimenting Connor on finding such a great wife. Julian didn't argue. He just watched me, a cold, mocking look still lingering in his eyes. "Yeah," someone chimed in. "Why can't I have a wife like that?" Somehow, we made it through the dinner. Afterward, Connor even gave me an extra $500 for a job well done. I was walking down the street with Leo, promising to buy him a new toy, when a car suddenly pulled up beside us. The door opened, and Julian stepped out with his long legs. The little hand holding mine immediately let go. Leo ran over, hugged his leg, and chirped happily, "Daddy!" Julian picked him up by the collar of his shirt and held him at arm's length. "Oh, so you do remember? I'm your dad." "Heh, daddy, daddy, daddy." Leo buried his face in Julian's shoulder, giggling and acting cute. They were so close, their bond palpable. There was no sign of a strained father-son relationship. I really had been played. Leo quickly looked up, his face full of pride. "But I earned money for Mommy, and I earned extra." Julian's gaze shifted to me, and he sneered. "Is this how you raise a child, Miss Miller?" My face was a placid mask as I put on my usual professional smile. "I didn't steal, and I didn't rob. It was an honest transaction. Do you see a problem with that, Mr. Vance?" He nodded slowly. "Fine. but you shouldn't involve a child. But this is who I am, I said, pausing to look him straight in the eye. As you should know better than anyone, Mr. Vance. All I care about is money. The smile vanished from Julian's lips, and his eyes darkened. After a moment, he asked, "Did you have to do it by pretending to be someone else's wife?" I froze. My hands, hidden in my coat pockets, clenched into tight fists. The truth was, after leaving Julian, I had never taken another job like this one. For 5 years, I had worked all sorts of odd jobs. Now I was running a fortune-telling stand by day and doing tarot readings online by night. It was enough to support myself. This time, I had done it specifically for Julian. I knew he and Connor were acquaintances, distant friends. I had also guessed that Leo would report back to him. So I knew he would come, and he would see that Chloe Miller had always been, and would always be, a mercenary, money-hungry con artist. I forced a casual smile. It was a consensual arrangement. What's wrong with that? So your marriage to Daniel was also consensual? Julian stared at me, his gaze intense, as if he could see the truth in my eyes. I didn't expect him to ask about that. Daniel was my ex-husband. My marriage to him had been a purely transactional affair. I needed city residency, so I could purchase a home and bring my mother over from the mountains to live with me. He needed a wife to get his family off his back about getting married. It was a perfect, mutually beneficial match. We received our divorce certificate exactly 1 year after we got our marriage license. To avoid any potential harassment, I only made the divorce public after my mother passed away 6 months ago. From Julian's perspective, it must have looked like I married Daniel immediately after leaving his family, only to divorce him just half a year ago. So I said yes. Daniel and I knew each other for a long time. If I hadn't been pretending to be Isabella, we would have gotten married long ago. Julian was silent. A vein throbbed on his left arm, and his fist clenched and unclenched at his side. Finally, he gave a self-deprecating laugh. So that's the real reason you wouldn't marry me? Of course not, I thought. Even if Julian now knew that I was the one by his side for those 3 years, back then, the person he loved and wanted to marry was Isabella, not Chloe. Besides, then and now, there was still an insurmountable gap between our worlds. That's right, I answered without hesitation. Then I curled my lip into a sneer. Why are you even bringing this up, Mr. Vance? Are you really this pathetic, falling for the con artist who tricked you for 3 years? Your love is pretty cheap. Julian had always been an incredibly proud person. That's why he fell apart so completely after he went blind and could no longer compose music properly. Words like these should have made him feel utterly looked down upon. But this time I seemed to have misjudged him. He didn't fire back a sarcastic retort, as I expected. Instead, he put Leo down and looked me straight in the eye. You're right. I did fall for the con artist. It felt as though my heart had been suddenly and violently squeezed. My eyes stung, and I had to fight back the tears that threatened to fall. Well, I don't love you. I only took that job for the payout of a few $1,000,000. I took a deep breath, barely managing to keep a smile plastered on my face. Since you have a problem with how I'm raising our son, Mr. Vance, you can take him. I didn't wait to see Julian's reaction. I turned and walked away. I was afraid if I stayed a second longer, the dam would break. He didn't speak or move, but a pair of small hands grabbed my leg. Mommy, don't go. Leo started to sob, his cries growing louder with each passing second. Daddy said he was bringing Mommy home. Mommy, don't leave me again. I suppressed my roiling emotions, knelt down, and gently pried his small hands off me. I tried to keep my voice steady. I'm not fit to be your mother. I left when you were only 3 months old. I don't have any feelings for you. Liar! Leo's eyes were red, half with anger and half with hurt. You kissed my forehead last night. I wasn't asleep. I froze. He knew. I had thought he was sound asleep. My mouth opened and closed, but for a moment I was completely speechless. Suddenly, Julian spoke. "I'll pay you $1,000 a day to take care of him. Since you only like money, you shouldn't have any reason to refuse a deal like that, right?" I didn't dare look him in the eye. After a moment of heavy silence, I gently pushed Leo away. "I refuse. And I hope that you and your son will stay out of my life from now on." I walked away without any hesitation. I never once looked back. But the moment I got into the taxi, the tears started streaming down my face. They splattered onto my phone screen. Just then, the screen lit up. An unknown number was calling. I declined it. The person didn't call back, but sent a text instead. "Miss Miller, this is Isabella. Can we meet? There's something I want to tell you in person." I told the driver to change course and headed to the cafe she had suggested. Isabella was already waiting for me when I arrived. The first thing she said to me was, "Julian and I never got back together." I ordered an iced Americano to help with the swelling around my eyes. "I figured," I said. "You're helping him, but I don't really get it. You two had a pretty big falling out." She smiled faintly. "A falling out? You don't mean him chasing me to the airport, do you?" I nodded. Isabella took a sip of her coffee before speaking slowly. "Everyone thinks he chased me to the airport because he was so madly in love with me. In reality, he just wanted an explanation. The band was just starting to get some recognition, and we were planning our second album when I quit without a word. Julian didn't understand why I did it, so he came to find me." She held her cup, her voice calm and measured. "Back then, the only thing Julian truly loved was his music." Isabella told me a lot. She said she had met Julian in the university music club and had fallen for him at first sight. To get close to him, she had even joined his band. She also said that while Julian seemed hard to get, he was actually quite easy to win over. He had said yes the very first time she confessed her feelings to him. As a boyfriend, Julian was certainly responsible. He sent her money on every holiday and anniversary, bought her gifts, and took her to the doctor when she was sick. He seemed to do everything a boyfriend should, but you just couldn't feel the love. At this, Isabella sighed softly and smiled with a sense of release. "To be blunt, back then, he had no desire to even sleep with me. We were together for 3.5 years, and the most intimate we ever got was kissing. No one would believe it if I told them. I only realized later that he was easy to win over because his heart was completely filled with music. Love was just an optional extra for him. He probably would have said yes to anyone who confessed." I took sip after sip of my coffee until the cup was nearly empty. What Isabella was saying wasn't entirely without evidence. When I first started staying with Julian, he always kept his distance. He wouldn't let me touch him. If he fell, he wouldn't let me help him up. He never smiled either. He would just sit silently by the window, listening to the music he'd once composed over and over again. This wouldn't do. If he couldn't get out of his funk, I couldn't complete my mission, and I wouldn't get paid. So, I tried every trick in the book to get closer to him. The first real shift in our relationship came in my 3rd month with him. The city had its first snow of the year. I wanted to drag Julian outside to build a snowman, and as expected, he refused. A blind man building a snowman? How novel. I ignored his sarcasm and forced him outside anyway. After we had packed 2 large snowballs for the base, I held out 2 grapes and 2 buttons in my hands in front of him. Okay, in my left and right hands are 2 different things for the snowman's eyes. You can feel them, and guess what they are before you decide. Julian hesitated for a moment. Then his hand fumbled forward. He completely missed both my hands and landed on my face. His hand was cold. The moment it touched my cheek, he snatched it back as if he'd been electrocuted. "Sorry," After a few seconds, I came to my senses. I took his hand and placed the grapes and buttons in his palm. One is a grape, the other is a button. Take your pick. Julian felt them for a long time. He stared ahead with his vacant eyes, his expression serious. The grapes, they're shiny, more like eyes. Okay, I agreed. But then I secretly grabbed a handful of snow and pressed it against his face. Then I ran off to the side, laughing brightly. Being blind has its perks. I can bully you whenever I want. Julian froze for a moment, then said with a sigh, I may be blind, but I can still hear. He crouched down, grabbed a handful of snow, and threw it in my general direction. He missed, but I pretended to be hit anyway, letting out a small yelp. Oh, you dare hit me, Julian Vance. Just you wait. I'm going to get you back, you little blind rascal. With that, I started grabbing snowball after snowball and throwing them at him. Julian fought back, a faint smile playing on his lips. He actually managed to hit me a few times. Snow got inside my scarf, and the cold made me wince. Hearing me shake out my scarf, Julian asked with concern, What's wrong? I pretended to be mad. You got snow in my scarf, that's so mean! He let out a soft laugh. Come here. Confused, I walked closer. Julian took off his own scarf, then fumbled as he slowly wrapped it loop by loop around my neck. In the process, his fingertips brushed against my skin several times, and each time he pulled back quickly. Finally, he said, You give up, right? After all, you can't even beat a blind guy. Warmth spread across my neck. I lightly kissed the corner of his lips, a fleeting touch. So what? I can still bully you. I think that was when it started, when I gradually lost track of whether my feelings for Julian were real or just part of the act. After that, Julian and I grew closer, but he was still quiet most of the time, too quiet, and it would become oppressive. So I went to a pet store and picked out the loudest, most energetic little bichon frise I could find. On Julian's birthday, I brought the puppy home. I had planned to keep him in a room and surprise Julian with him during the cake, but maybe I didn't close the door properly. The puppy snuck out. When I found him, he was sniffing around the cuffs of Julian's pants. Julian was clearly startled, a flash of panic on his face. A moment later, he crouched down and cautiously reached out. The puppy immediately licked his palm, whimpering softly. It's a bichon, I said, walking over and stroking the puppy's head. I was trying to surprise you, but I guess it turned into a scare instead. Julian shook his head, smiling. No, not at all. I love him. He said that, but later that night, as we were having cake, he caught my hand just as I was about to smear cream on his face. He brought my hand to his lips and brushed them against my fingers. So, can I have another birthday present? In bed, he grabbed my hand again and guided it to his waist. I can't see. Can you help me? It was the first time I realized Julian could play helpless too. That night, we were both clumsy and inexperienced, but we still spent a long time exploring each other. In the middle of the night, Julian was fast asleep. I gently touched his eyelids. Julian, I whispered. My real name is Chloe Miller, but you'll probably never know that. Now he knew. But the distance between us was far greater than just a name. After leaving the cafe, I went straight home, but I stopped dead at the top of the stairs. My apartment door was ajar, the lock looking like it had been forced open. I took a deep breath, pulled out my phone, and typed in the 3 numbers for the police, my thumb hovering over the call button. Slowly, I crept toward my apartment until the scene inside came into view. It was a disaster. Every inch of the place had been ransacked. And sitting on my sofa were the 2 people I never wanted to see again in my life. I couldn't see Buddy anywhere. I rushed inside and found him locked on the balcony, barking frantically and scratching at the glass door. My heart finally settled. The people on the sofa saw me and immediately stood up. Well, well, the rich girl is back. My father, Walter, was holding the Ultraman toy I had bought for Leo, a sneer plastered on his face. Heard you had a kid with some rich air. Must have gotten a pretty penny for that, huh? And you thought you could fob us off with just a few million? My brother, Ben, chimed in. Yeah, sis, that's a little cheap of you. My face was cold. I have nothing to do with them anymore. I don't have any money. Get out of my house. Walter's face flushed with anger, and he slammed the Ultraman toy on the floor, shattering it. You think I'm gonna believe that? If you don't give us money today, I'm not leaving. He had always been this quick to anger, and his rage was always directed at my mother and me. I sneered. Suit yourself. I started to walk toward the balcony to get Buddy, but Ben suddenly dropped to his knees in front of me. Please, sis, if I don't pay them back, they're going to cut off my hand. I don't want to be a cripple. Sis, please, I just need $100,000. He pressed his hands together, his expression one of sincere desperation. Walter scowled and pulled him up from the floor. What are you doing kneeling to a woman? If she won't give it to us, we'll go find that rich heir. If that doesn't work, we'll dig your mother up from her grave and see if she'll give it to us. My mother's cancer had progressed to the terminal stage because he had refused to let her go to the hospital. Now she was dead, and they still wouldn't leave her in peace. My patience finally snapped. I was trembling with rage. Fine, I'll give it to you. Walter froze for a second. Then a triumphant smile spread across his face. I knew it. Even if you changed your residency, you still have our family's blood in your veins. I didn't say anything. I just turned and went into the kitchen. When I came out, I was holding a knife. They stared for a second but didn't look particularly scared. Walter laughed and walked toward me. Who do you think you're scaring with that little knife, girl? Come on, do it. Swing it right here. I'm standing right here. Let's see if you have the guts. He was almost right in front of me. Ben tried to reason with me. Yeah, sis, that's dangerous. You might end up hurting yourself. It sounded like he was concerned, but it was a veiled threat. But he had a point. I couldn't win against two grown men. So, I pressed the knife against my own throat. That's fine, I'll just kill myself. There are only 3 of us in this room. Then you 2 will be murder suspects, and neither of you will get away. Chloe. Perhaps seeing the dead look in my eyes, Walter roared my name. He lunged forward to grab the knife. I stumbled back a few steps, and the blade bit into my skin. A sharp pain shot through my neck, and blood started to trickle down. They finally started to panic. Walter spat on the floor, still wanting to come at me. All right, you've got guts threatening your own father like this. I immediately pressed the knife in deeper. He froze, his eyes glaring at me. After a long, silent standoff, he seemed to make a decision, gritting his teeth. Fine, I'll be back. He turned and left. Ben followed, but not before trying one last insincere plea. Sis, why do you have to be like this? If you just gave us a little money. Get out! I spat the words out, my face blank, my grip on the knife unshakable. He left, looking disappointed. It wasn't until their footsteps faded away that I let the knife clatter to the floor and collapsed. The emotions I had been holding back for so long burst forth. I buried my face in my knees and wept, silent tears streaming down my face like a river. But then I heard footsteps outside the door again. I immediately snatched the knife from the floor, wiped my tears, and stood up. What? You think I don't have the guts to... I stopped mid-sentence when I saw who was standing in the doorway. It was Julian. Chloe? His eyes widened in shock, and he froze in place, but I felt a wave of relief wash over me. The knife clattered to the floor again. As if jolted by the sound, Julian rushed over. "What happened?" he asked, his voice tense. I shook my head. "It's nothing." I picked up the knife, went into the kitchen, and put it away. Julian followed me and grabbed my hand. His gaze was fixed on my neck. "Who did this?" His eyes and voice turned cold and dangerous, as if he had just remembered something. "Was it those two men who just left?" "No," I said, trying to pull my hand away, but his grip was too strong. Julian started pulling me toward the door. "We're going to the hospital." "I don't need to." As we argued, Buddy started barking again from the balcony. Julian froze for a second, his grip loosening slightly. I took the opportunity to break free and let Buddy out. He first circled me, then went over to Julian and sniffed his leg. Soon, he was jumping all over him, begging to be held. He still remembered Julian's scent. Julian crouched down and stroked his head, his voice soft with the joy of finding something he'd thought was lost forever. "Buddy, so you really are still here." Buddy rolled onto his back, whimpering and whining as loud as ever. While they were distracted, I found the first aid kit in the living room. Seeing this, Julian washed his hands in the kitchen and then took the kit from me. "Let me." I reached for it, but he blocked me. "You can't even see the wound. How are you going to treat it yourself?" I stared at him stubbornly. "There's a mirror in the bathroom." He was speechless for a moment, then sighed. "I've already compromised by not taking you to the hospital. Can't you compromise a little too?" I thought about it and said nothing, which he took as a yes. Julian sighed in relief and started by cleaning the wound with saline. As he worked, he said, "I looked into your family." He paused, then continued, "But is there something else I don't know?" I was silent for a long time. I remembered what Walter had said as he left, and I chose to keep it hidden. "Julian, this has nothing to do with you." "It does," he said firmly. "That night you gave me Buddy, I heard what you said. From the very beginning, I knew you were Chloe, not Isabella. So please, can you let me get to know you a little better?" I turned my head in disbelief. The cotton swab stung the wound, but I didn't care. "What do you mean?" Julian gently blew on the cut. "Don't move." He didn't rush to explain. He continued to disinfect the wound with iodine and apply a bandage. Only after he was finished did he let out a breath, looking at me with a gentle but firm gaze. "Remember the first time we met? I played the piano for you and you sang a song." I nodded uncertainly. He went on. "When Isabella used to sing that song, she always lacked a certain emotional depth. We talked about it many times, but when you sang it, your performance was full of emotion. Also," he smiled, "I deliberately played a wrong note on the piano, and you didn't correct me. If it had been Isabella, she would have stopped me immediately." "So you guessed back then?" I asked, stunned. That had to be the fastest I'd ever been found out in my entire career. But Julian shook his head. "I was just suspicious at first. I didn't dare jump to conclusions. It was only after observing you for a while that I was sure you actually did a very good job of imitating Isabella." As he spoke, he reached out to ruffle my hair. I instinctively leaned away. His hand hung in the air for an awkward second before he pulled it back. Julian gave a helpless smile. "But unfortunately, music is a hard thing to replicate perfectly. And besides, later on you let your real self slip out many times, didn't you?" He was right. I never expected to get so drawn in. I had played so many roles before, and I could always detach myself without any emotional baggage. But this time, the further I went, the more I couldn't tell if the one who loved him was Isabella or Chloe. I asked, "Why didn't you expose me?" "At first I was curious. I wanted to see how you would play the part. Later I was afraid you would leave." The bright lights of my apartment reflected a clear sadness in his eyes. Chloe, I was so scared. I was scared that, to you, I was just a job. I was scared you would abandon me without a second thought. He took a shallow breath. In the first month after you had Leo, the doctors told me there was a chance I could get my sight back. I was so happy. I planned to tell you everything the day I could see again, and then we would get married and have a proper wedding. He looked at me like a drowning man gazing at the last fading star. But you left, without a word. I knew there was a chance Julian's sight could be restored. His parents had told me immediately. They had even asked if I wanted to try staying on as Chloe. After all, I was the one who had pulled Julian out of his darkness and helped him reclaim his future. Maybe he could accept the truth. I had refused. At the time, I was still living under Isabella's name, and I naturally assumed Julian was in love with Isabella. Besides that, I was stuck in the mud of my past, and I didn't want to drag Julian and our child down with me. It was still the same now. But since I was never just a substitute, maybe I did owe him a chance to understand my past. After that, whether we moved forward or let go, I would accept it completely. So for the first time as Chloe, I looked at him without any pretense. Julian, nobody is born a liar. I grew up in the mountains. I was raised on my father's curses and my mother's meager protection. After I graduated from high school, my father wanted me to get married. The younger I was, the more money he could get for me. I didn't want to. My mother didn't want me to, either. Of course, we were beaten for it. I had known since I was little that my mother had been married off in the same way. Her status in the family was lower than that of the old workhorse ox. My mother was locked in her room, and I was locked in the storage shed waiting to be married off. I was 17 that year. My brother Ben was 14. The 14-year-old Ben was still good. He secretly came to the shed, let me out, and put me on the car with the volunteer teacher who was leaving the mountain. "Sis, run! You can't marry that old man with the limp." I promised I would, looking back again and again from the car, watching his figure shrink to the size of a sesame seed. I made a silent vow. I had to get out of these mountains and save my mother and brother. I set off with hope, and was gone for 3 years. But in those 3 years, I discovered that the evil in human nature couldn't be contained even by mountains. I was cheated many times. Working on a factory assembly line, people would ask me to cover their shifts but wouldn't pay me as promised. Someone told me you could buy a college degree, but he took $800 from me and disappeared. My supervisor said he would promote me, but then he cornered me in his office and said there was no such thing as a free lunch. There were many, many more. But the last time I was ever cheated, it was by Ben. After I left home, I trusted him and kept in close contact. So when he told me our mother was gravely ill, I believed him without a doubt. I rushed home overnight, but the moment I arrived, I was drugged and locked in the storage shed again. When I woke up, I could hear sounds of celebration outside. I knew I was being married off again. Ben came this time, but not to save me. He said, "Sis, this time it's Wang, the pig farmer from the next village. He's rich. You won't suffer if you marry him." I didn't give up. I begged him. "Ben, I'm your sister. Can't you let me go, just like you did 3 years ago?" He looked at me in silence, then smiled. "Sis, women have to get married anyway. Sooner or later, it's all the same. Dad said Wang will give us $3,000. Then I can get a good wife." I finally realized with despair that in this family, only Walter and Ben were a family. My mother and I were outsiders. "I have money. $8,000. I looked up, my heart dead. "You let me go, and the $8,000 is all yours, and I can give you more later." This was all the money I had saved from working multiple jobs. I had never told them about it, afraid my father would take it. But now I had no choice. I had to use that money to buy myself a moment of freedom. After that, they used my mother to blackmail me, forcing me to send them money constantly. To earn more money faster and save my mother, I became a con artist. and I took the job from the Vances to use the payout to buy my mother and me legal residency in one go and cut ties with them for good. It was just a shame. My mother only got to enjoy 4 years of freedom. The memories washed over me like a tide, soaking me before slowly receding. All that was left was a dampness that seeped into my bones, making me shiver in the cold of every night. Now I forced a smile and asked Julian, "So? Isn't it a ridiculous life?" His eyes were red, filled with a profound sorrow. He pulled me into his arms, his voice choked with emotion. "I'm so sorry, Chloe. I should have seen all this sooner." I pushed him away. "It has nothing to do with you. I'm the one who lied to you for 3 years." "Chloe," I looked up at him, holding back tears. "I don't want to drag you down. I don't want to be a burden to anyone." Julian shook his head, his fingertips gently tracing my face. "No, you're not a burden to anyone. You held on for so long, all by yourself. You saved yourself, you saved your mom, and you saved me." He smiled, tears glistening in his eyes. "Chloe, you're amazing. This is the you I love. The real you, the brave you. And also," he cupped my face in his hands, the tenderness in his eyes almost melting me, "the you that likes to lie." The tears finally fell. I didn't run away this time. I buried my face in his hands. "But I don't want to owe you anything, Julian. I don't want to owe anyone." After a long moment, he sighed. "Then let's do this your way. Let's make a deal. You let me handle your problems. In exchange, you have to stay by my side and be my eyes. The contract term. Forever." Just then, Buddy came over and licked my leg, as if he were urging me to give my answer. My heart was enveloped in a warm, loving feeling. Finally, I smiled and agreed. "Okay." I moved into Julian's apartment. When I walked in, Leo was hiding behind the sofa, his face a mixture of hurt and resentment. Buddy, however, was the first to run over and lick him. Leo kept pushing him away with his small hands. "You're the big liar's dog. I don't like you." But Buddy just licked him more enthusiastically. Julian laughed. "Stop pretending. Weren't you the one who was so excited about Mommy coming over that you couldn't sleep until midnight?" Leo's face flushed with embarrassment at being called out. He was kind of cute. He just huffed. Dad's hand was shaking at dinner that day. I saw it under the table. The smile vanished from Julian's face. "What are you talking about? Be careful or I'll make you do homework." This father and son were really alike. I took a limited edition Ultraman box set out of my suitcase. I walked over, knelt down, and apologized sincerely. "I'm sorry Mommy lied to you that day. Mommy doesn't want to leave you. Can you forgive me?" Leo's eyes welled up with tears, his lip pushed out in a pout. Finally, he couldn't hold it in anymore, and threw himself into my arms. "Mommy, wah! Mommy, don't go!" A lump formed in my throat. I gently patted his back and stroked his hair. "Mommy's not going anywhere. I'm never leaving again." Leo insisted on sleeping with us for several nights. Finally, one day, Julian couldn't take it anymore and sent Leo off to his grandparents' house. That night, he nuzzled my neck, completely content. "This is so much better. The bed only smells like you. From now on, Leo can sleep by himself." A tickling sensation spread across my neck. I laughed and pushed his head away. "No way. I missed 5 years. I need to make up for it now." As soon as I said it, Julian looked up. His brow furrowed, and he looked pitiful. "What about me? You left me for 5 years too." I sighed with a helpless smile. "Why are you competing with your son?" Julian stared at me for a long moment. Then he rolled on top of me, his Adam's apple bobbing. "Then you'll have to make it up to me in other ways." I nodded with mock seriousness. "Okay, how?" He reached over and turned off the bedside lamp. The room was plunged into darkness. After a rustling sound, he grabbed my wrist again and pulled it down. "I can't see. You have to help me." I was torn between amusement and annoyance. "Julian, you're not blind anymore." He lowered his head and bit my collarbone. "I don't care. This is compensation." An unbearable itch spread from my collarbone. I took a sharp breath and gave in, following his lead. I don't know how much time passed. In between our ragged breaths, he touched my face and asked again, "Chloe, will you marry me?" And this time I finally gave him the answer that was 6 years too late. Yes.